What felt like a pipe dream just a few days ago is actually starting to gain some backing, as today 2 NFL insiders doubled down on a new free agent that could find his perfect destination in Philadelphia. Also, Zack Baun hopped on a podcast with his teammates and discussed this Eagles defense, but he made one quote that I think is monumental as we head into the next part of the offseason. And one cornerback is starting to emerge as the front runner to win the job. We'll get into all of that and more right here on A to Z Sports. But welcome on in. I am RB. Hope you are all doing well on this lovely Thursday. We are going to start it off with one piece of news from yesterday. Out of nowhere, we get a bomb. The Eagles expected to hire LSU Director of Player Personnel Preston Tiffany. Sources tell CBS Sports. Tiffany, before LSU, was one of the rising stars in the college personnel world and was Director of Player Personnel at Ole Miss. So, Eagles take a big hit this offseason, and what do? Well, they're a responsible, smart, intelligent, just, ahead of things type of organization. They go out and they fulfill that void, and they pick up a rising star in the college world to be a part of their player personnel staff. So, shout out to Preston Tiffany. Welcome to the squad. Let's see what you can do. Now, one guy that doesn't need to change anything at all this upcoming season is Saquon Barkley. And he spoke to the media a couple days ago after mandatory minicamp. Not that we got too much out of it, but I really like these Saquon quotes. He says, despite his touches last year, he did not feel like he had that many. Feels like he is still entering his prime. This guy just continues to amaze me. He says he has emphasized rest and recovery this offseason compared to previous seasons, noting the workload. He says, I'm competitive by nature, seeing videos of Derrick Henry and CMC running hills and stuff. The old that would get to me, but everyone around me has told me to sit my ass down, so I am listening. And last but not least, Saquon Barkley says his motivation for this season, after winning the rushing crown in Super Bowl, quote, the thing that drives me and has since I was a kid, and I don't mean it in an arrogant way, I want to be the best running back that has ever lived. Man, just inject this into my veins. Put it up as a quote on the locker room wall. This guy's so hungry. He's going to come out and do it again. I'm telling you that right now. Like, this guy had so many touches this past season, and that's not typical, right, in this current generation of running backs, and he's just continuing to defy what we know right now in terms of the running back position, continuing to extend the bar, and I mean, he's fresh. Like, he's running behind the best offensive line in the league, and I think he's going to come out and have another dominant season. Do you agree or disagree? One guy who had a very dominant season last year who deserves a ton of credit is the guy who keeps it all together, Nick Sirianni. He says that he spent some of his time this offseason studying how to sustain success. He talked to coaches in different sports who have had success about what it takes to sustain it. He mentioned a couple, but, we've already heard reports about this offseason, the Belichicks, the Sabans, guys like that. And I think that's a really wise thing from Sirianni to do, not get too high on his ego and just continue to learn. He says everybody was there for mandatory minicamp, no excused absences. Just goes to show the camaraderie of this team. Everybody's locked in and ready to go. But one guy's not there yet. He might be there, though. We talked about him a few days ago, but we need to extend the information here because today 2 NFL insiders doubled down on this report. First, we have Jeremy Fowler of ESPN. He says that talking to people that have been around him or close to him, they believe loyalty is important to him. Connection is important. That's why I do have the Eagles on my radar with defensive backs coach Christian Parker, who was with him in Green Bay. They had successful years together, right? So we talked about Jaire Alexander in our last video. We talked about his contract situation with Green Bay, where he's at in his career, obviously dealing with a plethora of injuries, but still a very talented former Pro Bowl player. Eagles have a void at cornerback 2. Kelee Ringo's fighting for it. Adoree Jackson's fight for it, but Jaire is obviously better than both of those players. The question is, can he stay on the field? Very valid question. But also, where is he going to sign? Is he going to take a discount? Is he going to bet on himself for 1 year? If he does that, to me, that's the only way this could even happen and be realistic. But apparently, all these connections are things that Jaire Alexander values, right? Who's to say he wouldn't come here, try to go on a run, be on a showcase, be on display for the entire world to see, and try to cash in next offseason, kind of like Josh Sweat did last year, kind of like Dallas Goedert plans to do this season. In addition to that, we hear from Adam Schefter, who says, quote, now Jaire Alexander, if the price were right and you're doing a 1-year deal, whatever the number is, a low number, they can go make that work if that's what they wanted to do. Adam Schefter says Jaire Alexander could be a fit for the Eagles if the price were right. So I don't know why Shefty and Fowler would come out and just start mentioning the Eagles if they didn't think there was at least some, potential outcome here where Alexander ends up in Philly. No, they didn't come out and say the Eagles are the favorite. They're going to sign him. And I'm sure Alexander is frustrated based on the way his contract situation went. He had 2 years left guaranteed on his deal. Packers came to him and said, hey, we're going to restructure this. He said no. They couldn't make it work, so they granted him a release, and here he is. And my thing that I mentioned the other day was they couldn't even trade it. Obviously he was making a lot of money. I think it was like $21 million, but no team was interested in inheriting that money or figuring out a way where the two teams could split it. So that tells me there's not a lot of interest around the league, and that could, spark a bright light for the Eagles where they come in, swoop down, and sign Jaire Alexander, to a 1 year, $5 million deal or whatever it is. They have the cap space. They don't have to give up the picks now in a trade. So the question is, do they want to do this? Do they want to stir up the competition at corner? And I think that is a very valid question. But that takes us to our mandatory minicamp practice a couple days ago. This was the Eagles' first team defense for the 11-on-11s per Brandon Lee Gouton. And the thing I want to highlight here, the biggest battle on the defensive side we've been looking at is cornerback. And Kelee Ringo got the start. So during the 2 voluntary practices, Kelee Ringo had to start one time and Adoree Jackson had the other one. Now Kelee Ringo at the mandatory minicamp was the first corner out there. Obviously, they've been rotating snaps, but this coaching staff is high on Kelee, and they think he's going to emerge and be the guy. Still in a rookie contract, would be very valuable as a player, but obviously doesn't have that much experience, needs to continue to grow. And Elliott Shore-Parks put out a little clip after he was at the mandatory minicamp practice. Here's what he had to say about Kelee Ringo. He says, if he plays in training camp like he did this past Tuesday, he will be the starter in week 1. Kelee has made a few plays that stood out and shows the advantage he has over other corners, which is size and speed. Definitely long arms, definitely a lot lengthier than these other corners, but the thing is he has huge hands. He has been a little bit in trouble before in terms of, making contact and getting the penalties, so thinks he needs to clean up for sure, but I think sitting in the shadows last year and watching these corners go to work, watching Slay and Quinyon and all these guys just learn from each other, I think he's going to have a little bit of an edge. Not that Alexander, couldn't come in here and make an impact. I do think he could. Question with him is, can he stay on the field? But if they go with the current rotation and the current guys they have in here, yes, Adoree Jackson is a nice veteran piece, but you want to develop Kelee. You want to get him to that point. The beautiful part about this is that the Eagles have all the assets. They have everything lined up. And you're going to get the Jaire Alexanders of the world that just appear over time. Maybe a guy gets cut after training camp. Maybe a guy wants a trade after training camp. And the Eagles have the leverage to swoop in whenever they feel like it. So something to keep our eyes on. We'll see how it plays out. One guy on the defense who is here to stay. He's an absolute anchor. Zack Baun was on the new podcast with Cooper DeJean and Reed Blankenship. And this is what he had to say about the Eagles defense heading into the season. Quote, I feel like we're miles ahead of where we were last year, and that's a scary freaking thing. Imagine the Eagles defense being more advanced than last year. They were almost perfect last year. They were unbelievable. You almost couldn't even fathom how amazing they were at executing every single week. And you think about Zack Baun, a guy like him saying this, who went from a player that nobody knew, who was almost out of the league, to becoming an all-pro, getting a big-time contract. For him to say that is very special to me. It has a lot of magnitude. It holds a lot of weight. And if they get even better, oh my gosh, the league better watch out. One way they could get better is by the addition of a big-time draft pick. And if he gets back on the field quickly, look out for Jihaad Campbell. He inked his 4-year, $14.9 million fully guaranteed deal with a 5th-year option. A lot of high praise about Jihaad Campbell. I think he's going to have a big impact this year. And he actually was going through some linebacker drills at mandatory minicamp. So he's obviously not ready to go. They said his timetable was really unclear right now. They would not give any clear updates. He'll probably miss, if I had to guess, like training camp and probably the preseason. Maybe he'll come back for the start of the season. Maybe he'll miss a few weeks. Whatever it is, though, when he and Nakobe get healthy, watch out. And Jalyx Hunt is looking to have a big jump this upcoming year. Jordan Davis as well, who said he fell in love with Peloton. These guys are young and they're hungry. They just want to work. And Jeff Kerr reported that Jalyx Hunt and Jordan Davis frustrated Jordan Mailata the other day. We're talking about Jordan Mailata, who in my opinion is one of the best tackles, if not the best at his position in the entire league. Like Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata, don't take these guys for granted, man. They are holding it down. And the fact that Mailata's getting frustrated by Jalyx Hunt and Jordan Davis, that just goes to show there is so much potential in this defense. I feel like they're not even tapping into it fully yet. Last year was so incredible, and you're hearing these types of things from these guys. You see how mature they are? I feel like that's the tone that has been set by Nick Sirianni, and he's been all business, so he deserves a lot of credit. There is a lot to be excited about with this Eagles team. So go ahead, give me all your thoughts down below. What do you think the Eagles should do at the cornerback 2 position? Should they still try to get Jaire Alexander? Give me all your thoughts down below. As always, appreciate everybody for tapping in. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll catch you all in the next one.